lodge, right? And I was master. I've never been a guy that's like, I don't want to say, ooh, hey,
The
look at me type of thing, right?
I
I'm
was just I was the same way. Like I was more behind the scenes with everything. You know,
yes,
I that's what I thrived on at Lodge was like the Christmas party. Like there'd be 4 or 5 of us in the kitchen, and like we'd have that all organized while everyone was out there with the kids and Santa and stuff like that. Like I felt like I did better with that stuff than being in the spotlight because it's just who I was.
oh yeah, no doubt. I gosh, being master was that was a that was a long tenure, but I was able to finally get. I feel like that place is up and going and still alive today because of how you know the officers and I handled things, and it was, oof, man, that was a busy year because it was like I was playing. I don't want to say repair the image, but repair relationships campaign. Where to try to make people feel welcome to come and visit there.
Yeah, that was you did have a tough year.
I
I
feel
you know what
I broke the mold by
you
the end of
did.
it.
I'll say nothing prepared me for being master during COVID. You
Oh yeah,
know,
I can only imagine.
it was so Joe. It was so bad. COVID hit like what 3 months in. We had to shut down, which you had to shut down as fast as it was spreading. It was the safe thing to do, regardless of how people thought about it. Like it
Yeah,
was it
until we
was
knew what was going on.
right. It was the only like logical like safe thing to do for the membership of the lodge. But I struggled with like Lincoln Park Lodge. They would do these Zoom calls and they would have 30 people on a Zoom call. So I'm like, hey, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, Westgate did that too.
And so I'm like, all right, so I contacted everybody, sent out emails and Facebook posts, and that, hey, we're going to do Zoom calls at 7 o'clock on Thursday night, which was our typical lodge meeting, you know? And I said, grab your favorite drink of choice, alcohol, non-alcohol, whatever you want, and join us on Zoom. And let's just check in with everybody for half hour or however long everybody wants to BS. And I'd get 2 or 3 guys that would tap in on Zoom. So I
But
couldn't get them to engage.
that's crazy. I know when Westgate was doing it, I think they had like 8, 9, 10, maybe sometimes more people in there who were doing it. And I just remember, we would talk stuff, right? But a lot of it would just be, busting each other's chops. I mean, it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was fun to do. I really need to get back into lodge.
I do too.
Jake always reaches out to me. He's like, hey, love to. I mean, I still pay my dues.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just like man, it's like getting back into that habit. Like the first go round, man, I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
You know how I was too. I was the same way, and then things kind of happen, and I feel like now there's certain lodges are too focused on what Grand Lodge wants them to do and having make Grand Lodge happy versus making sure their members are taken care of. And why did people join masonry in the first place? Because they wanted to be around like-minded people, and they wanted to do things in their community. Well, when you quit doing things in your community and you do it where Grand Lodge wants you to do it, that kind of bothers a lot of members, and they quit coming for it, and they ultimately stop being a dues paying Mason over it.
No, I agree, and something that I really tried to push, and talk to people about, but it never really came to fruition. Because Solomonski enjoyed a nice regular attendance, right? Where Westgate had 150 members, but a lot of them were so older, they were in nursing homes, things like they weren't able to attend was what it boiled down to. Um, So and there's a lot of lodges out there like that. I believe Olive Branch was in that position. A couple were. I think Wolverine's in that position.
I think they are
Um,
now too.
Rouge Lodge was in that position. But I thought, why aren't we like consolidating? Not just we close down a building or we move to another building. No, like why aren't we consolidating? I know a lot of that has to do with ego, right?
Oh, it was
But
huge with ego.
I feel like the Grand Lodge in a situation like this should kind of not necessarily force it, but really not give very many options. Because if you can somehow make it so that these lodges have to combine together, let's say if you combine them all with their regular attendance, you combine 4, 5, 6 lodges and combine, I don't know, that's 60, 70 people that normally attend, right? You're going to lose some that aren't, they'll attend, but maybe not as much, right? But you're still getting 30, 40 people that are going to attend regularly. You know how much more a lodge could accomplish with that kind?
Oh, it would have
It,
been almost I hate to use the word unstoppable, but the just once you get momentum going, like you said, you're going to lose some people, but once you get that many people, because when you know how it was when you were a master, you have to sell it to your members.
yes.
You have to sell the buy-in to them. And if they do not buy in, it is going to be a long year. If you don't have your lodge members and your officers believing in what you want to do that year, it's not going to work.
No, it definitely won't. And it's crazy. I not with just Westgate members. I was calling masters, and I was attending other lodges 3, 4 days a week. Just hey, come on, check this out. Come on, check this out. Check out what we're doing. This that. I started getting new members to come in. It was just it was crazy because I had to learn all that stuff in such a short amount of time because things were the way at Westgate they were. Right? Jeff always seemed to be the master, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I was junior warden forever. I didn't mind it. It just was what it was, right? So I had to, and I probably should have been learning some of the other stuff along the way, but just didn't need to. And that was just that was just a long year, not in a bad way. I loved it, right? But it was just that plus I had taken on more responsibilities at work. I was in the process of getting married, and it was just it was a lot, and it burned me out.
Masonic. I don't think people realize how quickly you can get burned out. I like to coin it Masonic burnout. Because there's something you could do almost every day of the week Masonically if you really looked into it and wanted to.
Oh yeah,
You
no
could
doubt.
travel to a different lodge. They have a function outside a lodge. Every day, every weekend somewhere. Like there is always something going on that you could. And when I used to do home investigations,
Mm-hmm.
I would tell people, okay, it cost you. I forget what our dues were, like $125, and then you had your initiation fee. I said, okay, so there's your initial cost, but I said ultimately it'll cost you, because a lot of people would ask how much it costs you to be a mason for the year. I said, well, this is what it's going to cost you annually, bare minimum. But I said the sky is really the limit. Depends on what dinners you want to go to, what events you want to go to, things like that. You could spend 1,500, 2,000 a year. And one of the things I didn't agree with the lodge is a lot of lodges did it, and they didn't Grand Lodge even create that 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 lodge at the Dearborn Lodge, the
Yeah, I think that one lodge in the Dearborn Lodge, I think it was for the Scottish Rite
Scottish
for
Rite.
the members there, so that way they could because they felt that some of their I think duties with Scottish Rite interfered with their Blue Lodge, so they wanted something that was like in like one building, so that way it was easier to do. And I believe, if I'm correct, they attended Blue Lodge when they needed to before their Scottish Rite meeting.
They
Whenever,
did,
yeah, and I felt like that was smart, but also at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah,
yes, because part of that, and I heard this, just from some people talking.
Hmm.
There was a lot of Grand Lodge members between our couple of lodges,
Oh
and
yeah,
they were talking that lodge was essentially created to funnel people right into Scottish Rite. Because
yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I saw somebody get raised as a master mason, and the next business meeting or next week, because we used to meet the first 4 Thursdays of every month, and they would be like trying to like force a Scottish Rite application into this guy's hand, and I never agreed with that. I never did anything besides Blue Lodge. I
Mm.
I just never did. I didn't get into the shrine thing or Scottish Rite. I think that they all do a lot of good things, but
I did join the Scottish Rite. I believe I attended 2 reunions, and then I just I got busy with everything, wasn't able to attend. And I wouldn't mind going back because I will say the Scottish Rite, they put on some good events in terms of not just like the performances, for the degrees, but they have like those things that get people to write the books, come out and talk to people. They'll have like sampling of drinks and
mm-hmm.
a bunch of stuff. They do a lot of cool things that hey, somebody find somebody to watch the kid for the evening while you and the wife go out. And it's a really nice building, and especially the dining area is just like pristine. You boom, you
Yes,
go out there, and it's a really fun night out with your spouse. And it's a controlled cost. You don't have to worry about, well, I go there, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that. Well, it's all fairly, you have an idea what you're gonna spend. And I like the fact that it's structured, so it's not like you're like, okay, da da da, next thing you know, you're going, oh my god, that turned into $180. I was only
right.
planning on spending 100, and not that all that stuff's cheap or nothing, because it's not, but you have an idea of what you're going to spend. Excuse me, what you're going to spend. And I really like that. I mean, not that Blue Lodge is any different. The one, who is it? Who gave I think some of the best dinners, my Olive Branch.
Oh
I thought
yeah,
Olive
yeah.
Branch always did some of the better events, and I think that is, I remember going to Olive Branch and meeting, I believe his name was Chris, Mark, some of the other guys there. And I actually, when I went to Olive Branch for the first time, it's like 10, 11 years ago. I forget the gentleman's name, but he was their secretary. He had like black framed glasses. He was a shorter gentleman.
I
He
know who
was
you're
like,
talking about. I can't think of
yeah,
his name though.
he was like, oh, I used to be a member of Westgate back before it merged. And then I think he transferred out there because he moved out that way or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, when I lived in Trenton, before I moved out here to Flat Rock, a lady that lived 3 doors down from me, her dad was actually a member of Westgate. The only reason I found out, she goes, hey, you're a Mason, right? And I was like, well, yeah. And she goes, well, I've got this pin that was my dad's. And lo and behold, it was a Westgate pin. And I was like, wow, that is, what a crazy small world.
Exactly.
You would never expect to find that.
I've been in Louisiana now for a little over 3 years, and I'm still a dues paying member of Solomon's Key.
Okay.
I haven't just never officially filled out the transfer paperwork. I've never done it. And so what you're talking about, like a small world is before my grandmother passed. She lived in Tennessee, little town in Tennessee called La Follette. It was about 40 minutes outside of Knoxville. And we were down there visiting. It was about the year before she passed. I think it was 2019 because it was right before COVID. And we went to the Waffle House for breakfast in the morning. Well, the day before, she had a real big lodge about 5 minutes from her house. It was Thursday night, and I saw the lights on, so I just stopped to talk to the guys. And so I was talking to them. I didn't go in the lodge because they were in the middle of a meeting, so I didn't want to interrupt that. But we're sitting at the Waffle House the next day, Friday morning, eating breakfast, and here comes some of them guys from the lodge at Thursday night, and they gave me like probably 4, 5, 6 Grand Master pins. They were members of Grand Lodge.
Wow.
A couple of them used to live in Michigan and be members of Solomon's Key.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. It was crazy. Like because they lived up there when they worked in the automotive industry, and they retired to Tennessee.
And that's the Kentucky. Thinking of Tennessee, the Kentucky degree is what I never have had a chance to do. I've heard that is a wild time.
Oh, was it horse traders and confidence, or
Yeah, something that I can't remember. Everybody talks about how great it was.
Slayerville or something like that.
Yeah, yep. I've been to Apple Charlie's. The degree they do there.
That was always such a good time on Saturday night. They'd set the hay bales up, and
yeah, things like that are always a great time. I mean, the only thing that was ever a dread when you would go to lodge was whenever you had to decide to pay a bill.
Yes.
Like somehow this 30-minute debate about $150 is going to change anything.
Just pay the bill. It's got to be paid. Just pay it.
Right. Or, when we've discussed, when it comes to delinquent dues times, they'd be like, hey, this member, he's, in nursing home, his kids don't want to pay the bill, he's maybe got a year or two to live. And people are like, well, he should have set that up better and and we should. I'm like,
he's in a nursing home. He's been a dues paying member for how long?
Right. And so when I hear guys like that say that, I'm like, man, I never hope you're in a bind for anything. I mean, what do we got to pay? The Grand Lodge? I think now you have to pay the per diem or whatever to them. Like, who cares? It's so cheap, and it's like we're not. It's not really hurting us to make this guy defer his dues or make him a lifetime member depending on how long he's been there. And I just
one of my favorite things, and I know this is going to sound weird, but I don't know if it's one of my favorite things, but something I thoroughly enjoyed was I was on the funeral team, and
yes.
And I did the evergreen during the funeral service, and I took it upon myself to learn that. And the first time I did it, I thought I was going to throw up. It was a packed house, and most worshipful brother past Grandmaster Leonard was like, whatever you do, don't make eye contact with the family. He said, pick a focal point above the casket and look at that. And what did I do? I made eye contact with the brother's wife, and she's just sobbing hysterically. And I look over at Leonard, and I was like, I don't remember. And he gave me a couple of words, and kind of kickstarted me and got me going. But it progressively, and Leonard even said something after the funeral service. He said, there was a little hiccup. He said Paul's brand new. He's learning, but he said he's learning on what to do and what not to do, and he's getting over the stage fright. And it ultimately, it got easier. But I felt like that was one of the most important things we could do for a departed brother, was to show up and do a Masonic service when that was one of their requests.
Oh yeah, no, Leonard, Terry, and Bill were probably three of the best Masons that I've ever met.
Absolutely, I was married to Terry's daughter, and
yep.
I still talk to Terry. God, I mean, it's always we just text back and forth, but I probably talk to Terry minimum 3 times a week. If it's just shooting a text or, sending a story or something funny. But
he's a great guy.
He is a phenomenal guy. I remember, when me and his daughter, we decided we were, going to end and go our own ways and got a divorce. Because, he was my mentor at Lodge, which, got me involved. And me and him sat down and talked about it, and he said, well, you guys got a divorce. He said, me and you didn't, but they are good people,
Yeah,
just
no.
a just a wealth of knowledge that they have though masonically. If you sit down and like I would go over to Terry's house on Saturdays and we would study, just we would study the Black Book, just I used to be able to cite I would do the first half of the EA lecture from memory. Like I didn't even need the book, I could just rattle it off.
Oh, I got like that after a certain point. Um, and it was just more about, gosh, like Terry. I believe Terry was at all three of my degrees. So was Leonard. I know Bill was at. I don't know if Bill was at all of them or some of them, but I know he was. He was there. And those guys were pretty, especially. You know, uh, Not Bill. Terry and Leonard. I would say they weren't like direct mentors, but they were very, very, very heavily involved. Uh, when I,
Absolutely.
when I became master, when all that stuff had happened, Terry actually took me out to dinner. We had a couple drinks and everything, and we talked about what was going on. And he goes, you know what? I feel a lot better now about Westgate's future now that I got to know you a little bit more on like a one-on-one basis. And Leonard called me, and Bill had called me a couple times, and another person who I know not everybody's a fan of is Ray Lemons. I mean, he has become a very, very, very close friend of mine. I mean, he's helped handle all the real estate when me and my wife bought our first home when we moved here. He helped me with the inspections to make sure I didn't get fined when I put a upstairs in my other house, and I put
But
a
this
permanent
the thing
staircase and
is
stuff in. And
the thing with Ray is Ray is a wealth of knowledge, in multiple areas, in and out of the lodge. And I think, just the my dealings with Ray is he means extremely well, but some people don't care, to receive his knowledge because they have already made up their mind by something somebody else told them about, anybody. And unfortunately, I think Ray got the short end of the stick on that a lot of times.
oh yeah, he did for sure he did. And I don't think enough people were accepting or open to his methods. I guess his the ironic part is him and Jeff's methods are very, very similar, and that's the irony of it. They're both fairly direct individuals in that aspect. But with Ray's he's direct, but he's also very like, okay, let's see how this is going to play out. He make a decision. Let's see how it plays out. Where that's not always popular with a lot of people, especially in
No,
masonry.
no. Masonry, it can be very clicky too.
Oh yes, especially those older guys who have known each other for 30, 40 years.
Yeah,
Now,
you
now,
know what?
now, don't get me wrong. A lot of them were very, very accepting, right?
They were.
Nobody ever treated me as an outcast. That's the one thing I can say. No matter where I went, even though everybody had their groups, nobody ever treated me as an outcast.
I
Not
I'll,
once.
I'll agree with you. I'll definitely agree with you. Did I ever tell you the story about um it was Leonard, myself, Mike Sullivan, um uh Jim Christian, Jim.
Oh yeah, yeah. That we get this. I'll bring up a thing about Jim.
Um Richard Williams. There was like three carloads of us, right? And most worshipful brother Bill was there. We went up to travel to the Owasso Lodge. You know how they do like the multi lodge installation up there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they install. I think it was like 8 or 10 lodges all at the same night. Which is pretty cool to see. You bring up all the masters at once and install them, and everybody, just follow the line. So we're all signing in as visitors, and good old Leonard, he signs a visitor book. Leonard Davis, uh, past master or whatever, and he signed it Solomon's Key 580, the best damn lodge in Michigan, in their official visitors book.
Ooh, I know that ruffled someone.
You know, people still talk about that to this day. They still talk about when Leonard went up there and signed that book like that, you know, like
That that reminds me of when Olive Branch started doing that chant at all the dinners and stuff. Oh God, I forgot. I know it was like Mark, I believe Chris. Um, did you know Mike Kerr from Westgate? I don't know if you were around at the time. His brother Ben Kerr's in there. Steve Kerr was in there as well.
yeah, the name sounds familiar. I'd probably know him if I saw his face.
So Mike Kerr, when I was coming through everything, he did third in the final degree, right? I remember I was at this one lodge with him. He wasn't master anymore. I don't think somebody had asked him to do it. Man, this guy I thought he was about to poop himself. He was just so intense, man. You'd have thought he'd seen a ghost.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously I can't say everything in detail, but he was like, oh my gosh, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, I it's all in fun, right? Nobody gets hurt or anything, but it's man, I just remember Mike he had like this intense voice. Great guy though. I mean, I still talk to Mike Kerr every now and then. I mean, he was a great guy. He was actually master when my petition got approved, or it was voted on and accepted. And the very next year, Ben Jones was the master who brought me in, did my degrees. And then the following year, I believe it was Steve who did. It was either Steve then Ben or Ben then Steve. I can't remember which one.
I came through when Worshipful Brother Dennis Barger was master of the lodge.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Dennis is a great guy, but he's definitely intense too.
Yeah, Dennis, he's one of them guys that means well, but he's just a brash guy. Like if you really got to get to know Dennis to really know who he is and appreciate him.
But the one thing that I definitely being in masonry, that I definitely learned is I prefer brash people. I prefer somebody who's just going to they're not going to they're just going to say it, and so I'm not sitting there, somebody gives you some half blah blah blah, and then the rest of the day you're sitting there, you just can't wrap your head around it. You're frustrated, right? But when you deal with people that are brash and direct, even if you don't like what they got to say, at least and that's one thing I always appreciate about guys like Jeff, Ray, Terry. A little bit more. He doesn't BS you, but he's definitely got a little bit more tact.
Yeah. He'll try and say it so it don't like hurt your feelings or something. He'll be a little bit more careful on how he words things. And I'm very brash too 90% of the time, as I just say what I'm thinking, because I would rather tell you the truth once than a lie 10 times and have to remember what I said.
Oh yeah, no, and well, for me it was who God, who was it? It was not that long after I got made master, so everything was really chaotic. And I remember letting Jeff have his say on whatever we were talking about in the lodge, and at one point I kind of had to, hey, that's enough, and that was because in my head I wanted to say it a lot sooner, right? But I also wanted to respect his years, his knowledge, and
Right.
it was a difficult time, right? But at the same time, I'm going, man, this is the stuff of why some of the younger guys don't come for certain type of meetings, because they just don't want to hear this. Like, it's, hey, we get that you've been around since the days of horse and buggy. Like, nobody's arguing that. But, the world today is a lot different than it was in 1900. And it's not knocking anybody's age, but it's, what was relevant even 20 years ago is not as relevant today.
I've only had to slap somebody down with the gavel one time, when I was, and it's something similar to that is that they wouldn't stop, and the guy meant well, and he just wouldn't stop, And I looked at Leonard, and because Leonard was sitting next to me in the east, and he gave me the nod, and I said, "All right, brother, that's it." And I said, "Any more, and you're going to be out of order." And you have to, like you said, it's a delicate balance. You want to let them talk, but you at some point you got to say, "All right, enough's enough."
Yeah, no, you do, and that it's not an easy thing to do. It's not, because you generally have a lot of respect and love and caring for that person, and then sometimes they can create a little bit of hard feelings, and that's just, it's, I guess, it's just part of the process, if you want to call it that. But like they always say, though, the one thing you can count on at a meeting is somebody complaining about the bills and green beans.
Yes, and as master of the lodge, I learned you're not going to make everybody happy.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. And sometimes it's the person who had your back through the whole process that once you get in there, they're like, "Oh, I don't agree with that." And you're like, "What?"
Yes,
You're like, "What?
yes.
You just had my back for the last time, and now you're going to tell me what you don't agree with?"
I found that out. Um, but and that's it. That's one of the great things about being a Mason, though, is everybody could be master of the lodge if they want to. Nobody is
Oh yeah,
forced to be master of the lodge. You got to put the work in and show up and do it. And everybody's style might be a little different on how they handle things. And some people, because we would always joke, I know a lot of us would joke, but, a lot of people would be like, well, in my year as master, and they want you to do it their year, but we would always say it, jokingly.
oh yeah. It's
I made an edict when I was master of the lodge that we were not allowed to have canned green beans.
oh man, did Randy hate that?
Well, he's like, well, how about corn? And I was like, yeah, we can do corn, vegetable medley. Because I love Randy to death, but man, you get tired of Masonic green beans.
Those things are just, you're like, you would go anywhere and you can almost guarantee like 99.9% of the time there's going to be some variation of green beans there.
Salt,
Every,
pepper, and butter in them.
yes, yes. And sometimes there'd be ham in there, or bacon chunks, depending, but that was like once in a, and now you think that's usually something somebody made at home.
You know who makes phenomenal green beans is Russo.
Don't think I've ever had them.
When when he was when him and Ash Hampton had that catering business,
Mm-hmm.
he made really good. They had like bacon in them, and I think some like maple or bourbon syrup, and I mean they just really good green beans.
Oh yeah, those. Who else was really good with green beans? I think it was Jake Hessen. He didn't really cook much, but I think he had good green beans. It was either him or Jeff. I haven't had it in a long time.
Now does Jake still come to lodge all the time?
Oh yeah, he's there every single week. Him and his wife are two of the people who help push things.
He still got that business in Wyandotte?
Yep. Still does the printing business.
Okay, yeah, I thought he did.
Jake's just kind of Captain Steady.
You know what? Him and his wife Rachel are phenomenal people.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, they're like politically, we're all like complete opposites. Like politically, we don't really align on almost anything, right? But they're like, in terms of how the world should be, that's who they are.
Correct.
Because they live and breathe what they talk about. They don't just say it, disagree with you, and say you're a bad person. No, they actually live and breathe the things that they say people should do. They're not just doing it because it was repeated to them on CNN or something like that. They believe in helping people, right? And that's something that they're big on.
They live the way they preach.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are into politics should try doing the same thing, just in general, right? And that's not an easy thing to do. It's just not. Like, we feel something should be one way, but then we also do it another way. That's human nature. I mean, try not to do that, but it just seems to happen. And Jake and Rachel, they're just, they're good people. I mean, and they're genuine people. You know, like
Absolutely. And they rate the thing is they raise their kids to be the same way.
yeah, Natalie, I believe, is a lawyer now, and her husband, I believe, is a pipe fitter. I forgot what Jakey does. I don't remember.
Yeah,
But they,
he's got to be out of school by now, isn't he?
oh yeah, I think he's out of college too.
Yeah, I remember the daughter was going to what, Wayne State or something to
Yep,
become a lawyer.
yep. And then she went to MSU Law School. And I don't know if she's a prosecutor or nonprofit, something of that nature now. So I mean, you know, with how her parents are, I would hate to go in front of her if she was a prosecutor because she is not a dummy.
No, no. You better have have a strong case to try and even get out of that one. You know.
Oh yeah, I mean that, but that's just. I think Jake finally did his second round as master not that long ago. I think it was like a year or two ago.
I thought I remember Terry saying something about that.
I mean, it's. I think that lodge would have sunk a long time ago without him.
Yeah.
You know
I
that.
thought about, like you said, getting out of the habit of going to lodge is easy to do. And I find it hard to get back into going every week here. But I think once eventually I do, like I might hop in the line again.
Yeah, you know, for me it would be like a wait and see approach. You know, that's generally my way of doing things is kind of like wait and see. You know.
Yeah, I would definitely have to make sure like it was something I really wanted to do. I'd give it at least a year.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that. And it's. I think now Westgate every last Tuesday of the month is like family day. They do a lot more family oriented stuff at Westgate now. Westgate, where people used to be like, oh yeah, you can't take kids to anything, they do is now a lot more family oriented, and that was something that I tried to get going when I was in there, and then now it's
I
finally
remember
completely taken hold.
Westgate, like their installation was so like almost private too. Like
Yeah,
the installation of yearly officers is supposed to be a celebration, and like they never had like the wives and kids there and
they
nothing.
they, they do now. They have, I think, for most of the last 10 years or so. My second year when I actually got installed regularly was open, and I know most of them now. But before that, Jeff was kind of like, "Hey, I've been master so many times. Do we really want to go through all that?" And I'm like, "Not really. I mean, yeah, it's great to be celebrated, but at the same time, it's like, man, I'm doing the same thing again. I don't really need a,
Yeah.
and that was just kind of somehow. But I mean, it's a lot more. They're a lot more family oriented, family friendly now. Things of that. I mean, it's a it's a lot more welcoming. Not that people were not per se welcoming before, but it's a lot more like you're like, okay, this place isn't so bad.
And
Whereas
going I don't think a lot of people realize, like you know how it'd be, you get somebody come into the lodge, join the lodge, and they're eager, and they want to start helping out as a steward or something like that, and then people are like,
oh
"Oh,
yeah,
you need to get in line. You need to get in line." I didn't agree with pushing somebody to be in line unless they wanted to,
yeah,
because that is a multi-year long commitment.
yes it is, and it is, and if you don't have the greatest memory, that's a struggle.
So
That
you're
is a
talking, just say you
struggle.
start out as a steward. There's steward,
Senior
uh,
steward.
senior steward, junior deacon, senior deacon, junior warden, senior warden. So you're talking like almost a 7 year to 8 year commitment to become master of that lodge.
Yeah, and that's just not an easy thing to do.
No, like you gotta really want it and to do it, to become master of the lodge.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And there are some guys that just want to be a steward and help out, and that's fine. But I'd never agreed with trying to push anybody to do anything they didn't want to do.
Oh yeah, and some guys excel when they get pushed. Some guys shut down. That's just it's
It just
unfortunate.
is human nature. Like
Yeah.
you're only going to go one way or the other.
Oh yeah. No. 1,000% agree. Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. We've had quite a long podcast here.
All right, brother. It
Oh,
was good.
okay.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.